Jeff Trevarthen, Jeff the Mortgage Pro. Thanks for tuning into our Homebuyer Success podcast today. We are looking at how home buyers are succeeding in today's real estate market across the country. We have a low inventory environment in most places. We have high interest rates, and we just want to figure out how you can succeed. So, the thought of this podcast was just to reach out to different real estate agents across the country, figure out what they're doing and how they are successful and how they are getting their clients into contract and into homes. And I'm joined by a great guest today. We have a little bit in common. We've spent a lot of time up in the Northwest, not together, but at different times. And our guest today is Melissa Radtke from EXP on the McNally and Associates team. So welcome in today, Melissa. Great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited.
Yeah, so let's just jump right in here. Let's have you give the listeners a little bit of your background, kind of where you came from, how you got into real estate, and we'll go from there.
So I'm a Bay Area native, but I was living in Portland, Oregon, which is where we were. You went to
Yeah.
college in Portland, right?
Yep.
Okay. I was living in Portland, Oregon. I had been in the restaurant business for way too long to even mention, and was just looking for another option. I had a degree in interior design.
Mhm.
And in the 90s, I worked in San Francisco for a general contractor and a developer. So I had some background with construction and real estate. Just I had always been super interested and wanted to get my real estate license. So I did that in 2015 in Portland. So I'm a principal broker in Oregon. And then I
Okay.
moved back home to the Bay Area right before the pandemic. Really good timing. And then got my
Yeah.
California real estate license.
And if I'm not mistaken, you're licensed in both those states still, right?
Yeah,
Both
yeah, yeah,
Oregon and in California. Okay, great. So
yeah.
that helps out for any buyers that are out here on the West Coast and they may be moving back and forth, and that's a pretty cool attribute to have, that you're licensed in multiple states. So you work on a team right now. Tell us about your team and what area you guys serve and what type of clients you typically have.
So we are a small little boutique team inside EXP. Olivia McNally is the team leader, my business partner. She's a San Mateo native actually, so she knows the peninsula really, really well. And then Tegan Strong is our director of operations. So it's just the three of us. And I was lucky enough to be introduced when I moved back. The Bay Area is obviously very different than most places in the country.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
yeah, just a little bit. So I wanted to work for and with somebody that really knew this market. I mean, we're at luxury price points even for entry level properties. So
Yeah,
it's very competitive. So I was lucky enough to be introduced to Olivia, and it's just been the three of us for a couple years now. So, and then
that's
sorry, I realized
no,
I'm
that's great. And what type of clients do you typically serve? Is it mostly listings or mostly buyers or a combination of both?
It's a combination of both. Olivia is probably a little more listing heavy, but we like to work with everybody. I tend to do listings for family estates. I'm probate certified. So,
Wow.
and that's actually been a lot of referrals from Portland from agents.
Sure.
Everyone has family members, well, most people in Portland that live down here in the Bay Area. And so when the grandpa passes, we kind of take over, refresh the house, and then get it sold for them. I also work with a lot of kind of young couples, like first time buyers or maybe step up buyers here on the peninsula and in the city. And then I grew up in Mill Valley, so I take our Marin clients as well.
Yeah. So you got access all over the Bay Area. It sounds like for what type of clients you guys serve, which is great. So
Yeah.
for those of you guys aren't familiar with the San Francisco Bay Area, there's a peninsula on the left-hand side if you were looking at a map, and at the top of that peninsula is San Francisco, and then just south of that is the San Mateo market, which is where Melissa is located at. And I think that I noticed this with just about everybody in the Bay Area that there's markets that are very, very specific around the Bay Area, but for the most part, most of us can serve clients throughout the inner Bay Area. It's not that far to drive across the bay on
Hmm.
a bridge and help clients over on the Oakland side. And it's not that far, to go south and help clients down in the San Jose, Silicon Valley area too. So I'm sure that you serve clients all over the Bay Area,
Yeah.
not just in those specific areas. The Bay Area is a big place, and there's a lot of people, and there's a lot of different neighborhoods. But I think that you have a pretty good grasp of where your clients are.
And we're used to driving here in the Bay Area. So
Yes, for sure.
an
It was
hour
kind of
was
nice
like
during
nothing.
COVID a couple of years ago where there was like, open freeways and not a lot of congestion, but obviously that's turned around and changed back to the way that it used to be with lots of
Yeah,
traffic
it's
all over the
definitely
place.
over.
All right, let's ask a couple questions here. So, in a competitive market like the one that we have right now, what strategies do you use to help your buyers stand out and secure their desired property?
I think the most important thing, I mean, there are a couple things we do, but communication with the other side, with the listing agent, is so important. So as soon as I have a client that's interested in a property, I reach out to that other agent, kind of get the details. There's usually offer dates set here, so
Yep.
really making sure they know that we have a client that's interested, so they don't just take an offer. Sometimes there'll be an offer date, but if a preemptive offer, they call it, here comes in, the property might just be gone. So that's number one. And then, I mean, for the most part, these are kind of mandatory things on the peninsula specifically, but shortening up the timeline for the earnest
Yep.
money. In the contract, it's 3 business days, but we always do it payable in one day.
Yep.
Um, the earnest money here is also 3%, which I find a lot of buyers don't even know what earnest money is because they've never bought a house before, and it's kind of weird what's earnest
Yeah.
money.
What is earnest money for those people who don't know what it is?
Right? I guess I should have explained. So it's an initial deposit. It's kind of a good faith deposit. Um, and most other markets, it's, negotiable, but here in the Bay Area, it is 3%. And if you put less
Yeah.
in, your offer is not getting accepted. So that's an important detail. Um, what else do we do? Oh, so now that's another thing. This is really specific to the Bay Area too, and I'm sure people have heard about this. They're usually offers are non-contingent here,
Yep.
but we have to protect our clients too. That's our job. So the inspections are done up front here. So we're not really waiving the inspection contingency because there are inspections. I would never
Hmm.
suggest buying a property without inspections. And then the financing contingency, our lenders, as you know, well, work differently here. Everyone has a fully underwritten pre-approval. Well, not everyone. All of the offers that get accepted have a fully underwritten pre-approval, so
Yeah.
that you can waive that financing contingency. And then the only thing that can be a little bit challenging is the appraisal contingency, because you have to ensure that your clients are not only comfortable with the idea that an appraisal could come in low, but they have enough cash to cover that shortfall. Because if you do have a low appraisal, and a non contingent offer, you're going to have to cover that with
Yeah.
cash.
Yeah, those are all. It's such a competitive market around here. It's one of those things where it's like, man, how do you like? I don't know. It bothers me a lot that it's like that in our area specifically. But at
Yeah.
the end of the day, just on the lending perspective of doing all that stuff, like it kind of removes a little bit of pressure from me once we know that like we're non-contingent. I don't have to meet any deadlines in terms of
Yeah.
what things are getting done. But usually we try to shorten up the contracts and get it closed as fast as possible. But I think there's a big discrepancy between the different types of pre-approvals that you have out there. A lot of clients forget and they don't know. Well, maybe they don't know
Hmm.
that a lender, someone like myself is really just a salesperson. That's all we are. Like I know what the guidelines are, and I can read, and I can determine most things and whether or not that person's going to qualify or not. But if there's marginal things, we want to make sure that we run that by an underwriter to have them look at it because they're the ones that make the ultimate decision on whether somebody's going to get a loan or not. You mentioned that people, your clients typically have fully underwritten pre-approvals. Like I try to do that on every single one, but there are people out there that don't do that, and that scares the crap out of me, man. It's like
Yeah.
you're going to lose some money if you don't perform on this particular transaction, And
Absolutely.
it was even worse during COVID when values were all over the place, and you saw like the appraisal contingency you're talking about. Like if an appraisal came in $100,000 low, like a buyer was just like out of luck. There wasn't a lot that they could do in a lot of instances. So I always like to try to have a backup plan. Meaning like if you're going to do a jumbo first, with 20% down, maybe like if the appraisal comes in low, we could do like a conforming first and a HELOC second or something like that, just to have a contingency for the contingency that we may not have in
Hmm.
there if in case the first loan doesn't work out. So That's great that you do that for your clients. I love it.
Well, and
Do
that's
you,
another reason that it's so important also to have a good lender. And you touched on something that I'd forgotten to mention is the shorter escrow time. So if you can
shorter
really,
period? Yeah.
that's you also need to be in communication with the lender and working with them. What can they do? Because they have to agree to all these things. You can put anything in a contract, but if the lender's not on board, then
Yeah. Do you ever see people putting more than 3% down for the earnest money?
sometimes, yeah, and sometimes they'll make it, they'll release it to the seller right away. Like if you, I mean, I would never suggest doing that, but if you really
No.
have someone that's just like, I have to have this house, there are more steps you can take, but the earnest money will be at risk.
Yeah. 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 It's interesting. I've seen other places in the country where it's like, I'll put $1,000 down for an earnest money
Oh
deposit. I'm
yeah,
like, wow, you could do that? Like, I
yep.
had no idea. So that's a great one. Well, all right. Next question. Can you explain the importance of conducting a thorough CMA or comparative market analysis for your buyers? Why do
Yeah.
you do that?
So that's another thing that's important. I should have mentioned that too. Everything's important. Um, you there's no way. So the list price, I always say this, I'm not going to swear, don't worry, but I'm always, the list price doesn't mean you can fill in the blank. It doesn't mean anything. It's a marketing tool, and people get so caught up in, well, I don't want to pay more than that list price or whatever. So I'm always
Yeah.
telling clients the list price really doesn't mean anything. Let's look at the data. And it's so important that you have an agent that's going to be very data driven, show you everything that is sold, why it's better, why it's not as good as the property. And so what we try to do is we try to determine what we think an appraiser uh, would decide the value of the property was today. Now, I mean, we may,
Hmm.
the appraiser is just another opinion, but it's all based on the same data. So we really try to pinpoint that number with facts, show the client this, and just throw the list price out. And I have had some interactions with newer agents sometimes, and you go to real estate school, you get your license, they don't teach you how to run a CMA, they don't teach you
No,
comp
they don't.
at all, so you're winging it. And I remember I've had a couple of friends that were new, and they were just putting offers in because the client told them what they wanted, and I was like, well, what does the CMA say, what? And he's like,
Yeah.
oh, I don't know, I didn't do that. And like, okay, so let's let's go through all of the, so what we do is you want to use closed sales, although I will call the pending listing agents
Hmm.
and find out where they're pending, but we don't really, this is just kind of inform, but we don't really use those as
Right.
much. um, and then only go back 6 months, although, and I have a question for you. I have been going back a little bit further lately, up to a year. Do your appraisers go back a year right now?
It just depends on what's available. With the shrinking supply over the last year, they will go back longer than 6 months if they can't find the data that they need within the specific area. So, we're lucky in that we have a really populated area that we live in.
Yeah.
So there's transactions going on all the time, and if they just not enough transactions, then they'll have to look a little bit deeper than 6 months. But typically, the markets change so fast around here that they try to keep it within those 6 months.
I know ideally I try to do just 90 days, especially when there's any kind of, and it's been
Yeah,
a little bit flat lately, but yeah, any kind of shifting market, I want to look at what's happening right now.
yeah. You brought up a really important point that I wanted to mention. I'm glad you brought it up. Is that everybody wants a deal, and here's my perception, especially in super competitive markets across the country right now. A good deal may not be what you define as a good deal.
Hmm.
And what I mean by that is that you may have to pay more than what the list price is, like you're talking about, maybe more than what the comparable sales are telling you what the property is worth. But it's a good deal because you're outpacing the market. It is so ridiculously competitive that in some
Hmm.
instances, if you get a property that's just over asking, or a little bit more over asking, in a year's time with appreciation, that's going to look like you got a really good deal.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
absolutely.
Because the market continues to accelerate in terms of the appreciation that's happening in properties, and I don't see an end to the inventory shortage. I think
Hmm.
I saw some data yesterday that was talking about the Mortgage Bankers Association, and they don't see very much movement in housing until interest rates get down around 5%. So right now we're at 7.5 to 8%. That's a long ways to go.
Yeah.
And interest rates, they go down slowly, but they go up really fast. And it's always kind of how the trend is. So it could take some time for interest rates to get down to 5%, which means that we're going to have this supply problem for a really long time if people are not going to be moving,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
So yeah, I thought that was kind of an interesting thing that like people are really getting good deals, but not in a good deal of sense of like I'm getting the property for less than what the property is listed for.
Hmm.
I don't think I've seen any that in the last at least couple of years around here that people have gotten properties for less than what the list price is. Most of them are like either at list price or more
Hmm.
when they're trying to get the properties, right?
Well, and that's another thing too. When we are doing the CMA, we always tell clients the sales price is a combination of the three C's. So it's the comps and the condition of the house. You have to compare like to like, but it's also the competition factor. And so
Yeah,
another way that the communication with the listing agent comes in super handy is you need to be calling them the day before, calling them the morning that offers are due. How many offers are you expecting? How many are confirmed? How many do you have
yeah.
in your hand? Are you writing an offer? That's a good question to ask.
Do they have to tell you that? I mean, I always wonder, like, is
No.
that like an ethical thing, or is that a
Mhm.
legal thing where they have to tell you if they have offers, or
Yeah,
do people bend
absolutely.
the truth a little bit, or
Yep.
I don't know. I didn't know, which way to go on some of those
We
sometimes.
do have to tell the truth. You cannot say, but people get tricky. Like they'll say, "Well, I'm expecting two more," or whatever. That's why I'm like,
Yes.
"Do you have it in your hand?" Or and we do we have this is a California thing, the disclosures. That threw me when I first got my license here. I was like, "What are all these pages, hundreds of pages of documents?" So we ask how many disclosure packets have been downloaded
Mm.
to. So you just got to ask the question in like five different ways to try to get
Yeah,
to the answer.
that's a great way to put it. All right, here's another question for you. When representing buyers in a seller's market, what tactics do you employ to increase the chances of a successful purchase?
So definitely the communication,
Yeah,
just making their offer as clean and perfect as possible for them, and being super accommodating to the seller. Now, a lot of times, the Bay Area is a little bit special. A lot of times people have moved out already, but say the seller's still living in the house, do they want a free rent back?
mm,
You don't, the first month of your mortgage, you don't have a payment. So you can give a seller a couple weeks free to stay in the house and like pack up after closing. And it doesn't really, you're not paying double like if you still have an apartment. So
yep,
that can work. And I do think that the things that we have to do here are so helpful for other markets. And I've employed them in Portland, and you literally blow people out of the water because your offer is just so buttoned up and
yeah.
perfect. And it's not always the highest amount that wins. Sometimes it is, but sometimes there are things that are more important to the seller, like a rent back or you know, um, shorter closing days. There's lots of little things.
Yeah, that's interesting. I lost a transaction the other day. We offered a 15-day close with a 45-day rent back, and they said that the rent back wasn't long enough. And we're
That's a
kind of like,
that's a long time.
what? Like, should we just have done a 30-day close with the 45-day rent back? I don't know. Like, I was so confused. They wouldn't give us any more data. Like, I'm sure there was other things going on, but
That's a
I was just
bummer.
like, what? I didn't know. Yeah. So for those of you who aren't familiar with that, so when you close on a transaction, let's say you're moving from one place to the next, um, oftentimes the seller has to like stay in the property because they may not be able to find their next property until their house is sold. So without having to buy a property contingent upon the sale of their house, whether they're moving in the Bay Area or they're moving to a different market anywhere across the United States, they have to be able to have some time to find that next property because just like we were talking about earlier, inventory is so tight around the country. And just because you can sell your house quickly doesn't mean you can find your next house that you're going to buy quickly if that's the
Hmm.
case that you have. So rent backs are super, super important. And I think a lot of people should be employing that, especially in different markets around the country that are highly competitive right now. So
Hmm.
it's a great point. Um, I like this question a lot. How do you maintain a strong network of professionals like inspectors, lenders, attorneys to provide like top-notch service to your buyers?
Yeah, our referral partners are really important. It just happened the other day. I, I had a buyer close on a property. Well, they were about to close on a property in Marin, and insurance is kind of a big issue lately.
Yeah.
Um, all of a sudden, her insurance carrier would not cover the house because of where it was located. So it was, of course, this stuff always happens at on Friday at 5:30.
Yep.
So
On a holiday weekend. On
yeah,
a holiday weekend.
so I called someone. So I'm in a business networking group for the San Francisco Bay Area.
Mhm.
Just because I didn't have all those partners when I got down here. Olivia, my business partner, did, so at least I could tap into her resources. But it's just important that you're out meeting people. Getting to know inspectors, calling them up. I do some cold calling, so really making those connections before you need the person to help you, and
Yeah.
then sending the business, trying to build those relationships based on what is it what how can I help you in your business. So yeah, all of those connections are really important, because another thing too, if you need like if we needed home inspection for a buyer, say maybe the property didn't have a home inspection, if you have someone that you actually know, you can call them up to or text them and say like, hey, can you show up tomorrow? It's busy around here, so a lot of times
Yeah.
other professionals are booked like weeks out. You've got to have those people in your back pocket.
Yeah, I think that when you do a really good job on transactions like Melissa does, hopefully like I do, people people don't realize how many people are involved in closing a
Yeah.
transaction, right? I mean, if you just start with your side of stuff, right? You have a buyer's agent and you have a listing agent. You have an assistant to the buyer's agent. So somebody might be like your transaction coordinator, right? Oftentimes the listing side has a transaction coordinator, right? So those are just the real estate people involved. And then you have, in some states, title and escrow. And then in other states, you have attorneys. So title and escrow, you have a title officer and you have an escrow officer. Oftentimes they serve as one and the same, but not always. Those people have assistants in transactions. And then on the lending side, you have a lender, and the lender has an assistant, and then a lender has a processor, and a lender has an underwriter, and then a lender has a closer typically. So you have another, five or six people involved in that part of the transaction that look at your stuff.
Hmm.
And then you have outside people who are doing home inspections. You have an appraiser that's involved in the transaction. And it's just blows my mind sometimes to think about like, wow, we can close a transaction in 10 days and there's that many people involved. Like it's so
Yeah.
funny when you get into contracts sometimes and then you get a listing, an email from the listing agent. There'll be like 15 people CC'd on there and like nobody knows anybody's names and what's going on. But, I think it's really important for buyers when they're trying to buy property to work with professionals like Melissa, like the McNally and Associates team, just because like they make it look so easy, but there's really a lot of hands that are dealing with, trying to close the transaction. Like everybody's on the same team once you're in the transaction. We're all trying to get it closed
Yeah.
as quickly and smoothly as possible. But with that many people involved, inevitably something's going to go wrong sometimes, and that's okay. It's like my analogy of that is always that like if you're going to take a plane flight from San Francisco to New York City, like you can aim, at New York City right on the dot, but if you're off by just 1 degree, you could be hundreds of miles off in that path to get to New York City if you're flying across the country, right? Just 1 degree difference is going to make a huge difference in where you end up in that transaction. So when you get off course, it's important to like make sure that you correct and go back to that same destination that you're trying to do. So there may be bumps along the way. We can't guarantee that there's not going to be any turbulence, but we always try to do the best job we can of solving a problem quickly and moving forward and making sure that everybody's on the same page and getting it done.
Hmm.
But you mentioned this from the very beginning that communication is the most important part. And I would agree wholeheartedly that communication across the board on all those different parties is necessary. And it's just the professional way to make sure that you have a clean and successful transaction going on. So
Absolutely.
kudos to you guys for providing that type of a service for your buyers out there. Um, Last question here for you. I like this one too. So, how often or how do you provide ongoing support to buyers even after a transaction is completed, and then fostering a long-term relationship with them?
We have, I mean, there are a few different ways, actually calling them on the phone is a good start, like just
Yeah.
staying in touch with them. We do a lot of renovations for clients too. So, and they know about that. So they will usually reach out if they need help with something. We do have client events that are really fun. And a lot of, Olivia has two little kids. A lot of her clients have small kids.
Yeah.
So we do like pumpkins in the park, and we do a really great ice skating event in winter with Santa at the outdoor rink in San Mateo. So we invite everybody to those kind of things. We do, like, there was the national night out recently for her neighborhood association. So we're just continually, inviting them to our events, not being too annoying, but just, this is what we're
Yeah.
doing. If you guys want to stop by, that's pretty much it.
The reason I asked that question, and I know that you guys have this type of business because I have the same type of business, but we both work, strictly on referrals. Like I don't spend any money on advertising whatsoever. I rely on my network to,
Hmm.
I try to do a really good job. And if I feel like I did a really good job, then I want to make sure that the clients know that I did a really good job. And I want them to feel like I did a really good job. And I want them to refer us to future clients. And I know that you guys do exactly the same thing. So having events like that is really important. I think it's so funny how when you do a real estate transaction, you spend so much time with somebody for, an extended period of time sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be like 6, 8 months, a year before somebody buys a house in these competitive markets.
Yep.
So when you're continuously in touch with them, it's like you're almost friends by the time the transaction's over, right? It's not just a person that you're working with. It's like somebody that you actually care about by the time you're done with the
Totally.
transaction. So you know what I mean?
Yeah, I always thought that was so weird. It's an odd thing, especially with buyers, because it's intense at the end, and like, yeah, it can be 6 months or longer, right? But
Yeah.
especially right before they find the house and get, their offers accepted, you're with them a lot, and it's emotional, and so you see them like, and you're talking to them so many times a day and texting, and then all of a sudden, once the property closes, it's like, oh, we're it's weird.
I miss them. I'm gonna call them.
I know. It's like,
I know I do that sometimes too.
totally. It's like a weird, like, it takes a minute to get used to because you're like, where'd my friend go? So,
Yeah,
yeah, we try to have everyone be our friend at the end.
I love it. Well, what a great conversation we've had here, Melissa. Why don't you tell the clients or the clients? Why don't you tell the listeners out there if they would like to get a hold of you, if they would like to ask you more questions? What's your phone number? What's your email address? What areas do you serve? How can you refer clients in different places across the country? And just let people know how they can get in touch with you.
So, yeah, that's another thing too. If you're looking for an agent somewhere else that's not in the San Francisco Bay Area or Portland, we have a really large referral network, so you can always reach out for that as well. I met Melissa at McNally and Associates, Melissa, and then my phone number is 650-437-5783. But then I'm also active on social media, so it's Melissa the Real Agent with underscores between the and real. Um, yeah, so I post a lot of, educational, like you do, educational
Yeah,
videos
perfect.
and content there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. If you guys need to get a hold of me, my name is Jeff Trevarthen. I go by Jeff the Mortgage Pro. That's my handle on Instagram and in YouTube in particular, and on Facebook. So you can reach me in those different places. If you need to give me a call, you can reach out to me at 408 761 6849. That's my cell phone number. So feel free to call or text. Um, Hopefully during business hours, but not all hours of the day if you can. But thank you guys so much for listening, Melissa. It was a pleasure chatting with you today, and I look forward to chatting with you again really soon.
Jeff, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun.
All right, guys, have a good one. We'll see you on the next show.
Bye.